Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us after a fun evening, I'm sure, at the bar last night. We appreciate you getting out of bed early to join us for a very important education session. My name is Kristen Urisic-Scott, and I'm your education co-chair as well as the SEPC treasurer. I would like to start by thanking our sponsors. Without them, none of this would be possible. Our Education Session 1 sponsors are Awesome Farms and Produce, B&W Growers, Birch Farms, City Roots, Driscoll's, First Fruits Farms, Florida Classic Growers, New Lime Co., Robinson Fresh, Vidalia Sweet Produce, Collins Family Farm. Let's give them a round of applause. I also see a lot of you enjoying some of the coffee and refreshments out there. They're going to be available in between the sessions also. So I'd like to thank our refreshment area sponsors, who are ACO Farms, Despre by WP Produce, Fowler Farms, National Mango Board, New York Apple Association, Washington Fruit Growers, Woodbridge Sales and Marketing, and Zespri Kiwi Fruit. Let's give them a round of applause. I'd also like to remind you all of the SEPC antitrust reminder. It's up on the screen. All that good stuff that we don't talk. Price, competition, reminder on there for the screen for you. So our moderator and panelists are going to have a chance to tell you about themselves and how their organization is innovating in the food waste space. So for now, I'm just going to introduce them by name and title from left to right. So first we have our moderator, Pete Pearson, the Global Initiative Lead for the Food Circularity Program at the World Wildlife Fund. Abby Pryor, Chief Commercial Officer at Bright Farms. Justin LaCroix, Director of Sustainable Operations and Brand Lead Health and Sustainability at Ahold Delhaize USA. Nathan Fenner, President and Co-Founder at A-Fresh. And Luis Yepes, Chief Procurement Officer at the FarmLink Project. Let's give them all a round of applause.
Okay, test. Mic working okay? All good? Sweet. Again, my name is Pete Pearson. I'm really happy to be here. I came in late last night. Looked like you guys had a pretty good party going last night. So great to see so many people actually here this morning first thing. Mic's off. Hello. All right, looks like I'm back. Again, good to see people here after the party last night. I am kind of an odd job, I guess you could say. I work for the World Wildlife Fund. How many, just by raise of hand, how many people know who that organization is? A lot of people. Like, it's a very recognized brand globally. And as you can imagine, our primary function is to save nature. It's to conserve nature globally. And one of the things that we are adamant about doing is this does not happen at the expense of people, right? If we are going to conserve nature and conserve wild places, we also have to do that and understand livelihoods and understand things like nutrition and health, and people have to be part of that equation as well. Each year we publish something called the Living Planet Report. So this is a year-over-year analysis of the state of biodiversity. And unfortunately, since about 1970, that trend has been going down. We are losing populations of amphibians, of mammals, of insects, and we need to see that trend reverse itself. We need to see things, we need to actually build more life on this planet. That is our function. I work as part of our food and agriculture program globally. So when you look at how World Wildlife Fund is structured, we have these pillars of work areas. One is oceans, one is forests, another one is climate. And I work in this unique one that's relatively new called food, the food practice. I'm headquartered out of our DC office in the US, but I'm part of a network of about 80 offices globally, and of which many of them focus on food and agriculture as one of the biggest programs that we have. Now, as part of that too, I work within this space of fresh fruit and vegetables, commodity crops, animal proteins. Like, I kind of have to look at the entire food system, not just fruit and vegetable production. But we also do this looking at it from farm all the way to fork. So we've done a whole series of analysis on farms called No Food Left Behind over the last 7 years. And it focuses specifically on fresh fruit and vegetable supply chains and the interventions, the reasons why we have loss, the reasons why we have waste. And so this is an area that I've studied for a long time. And then just to give you some perspective on how I think about things. I grew up, I came out of college as an IT guy, right? I graduated with an information systems degree. I went to work for a grocery chain company and worked in the IT department. Something happened. I went and got an MBA in sustainable business, and my whole focus really shifted. I knew that I didn't just want to be an IT guy the rest of my life, but working for a retail grocery chain and studying this idea of sustainable business and sustainable and environmental issues really changed my trajectory, my focus. I actually was a sustainability director for a large grocery chain for several years, and then I made this pivot to World Wildlife Fund and focused on food loss and food waste, which for an environmental organization is kind of weird. But just to get our brains moving in this direction, when we look at the issue of food waste, it's estimated about 30 to 40% of the entire food production globally is lost or wasted. When you piece that apart, the majority of this is happening within your commercial businesses, your retail, and also in homes, right? A smaller percentage is happening on farms and at the beginning of the supply chain, but I think this represents a really interesting intersection for us. Even though it might be a smaller percentage, I think this is the moment when you can start to look at where in the supply chain is the biggest opportunity to rescue edible food, especially fruits and vegetables for people that need it most. And it represents the point that is the most efficient point to have interventions to bring more fruit and vegetables into the marketplace. So as we look at this panel today, I think it's important. I would love to have this be interactive. I would love to have us really take questions and look at this as, let's solve some problems. Let's figure out how we move the needle on this issue a little bit. I look at this as an issue within the United States, but I also have to look at it as a global issue as well. That's not my time up, right? That was stop. That's not the stop. That's not the stop talking cue. Okay. So the one thing that I am really interested, we have the way that we produce food in a place like the United States. In some ways, it looks very different than other parts of the world, right? We have a lot of cold chain. We have a lot of sophistication in terms of how we manage inventory and manage food. And so I always have an eye for how are the things we're doing in a place like the US, how can they be leapfrog moments for other places all around the world? And so this is something that I keep an eye out for all the time. And I think it's important, like we need to be modeling how to do things better because we know we have a planet that is growing in population, but more importantly, it's growing in affluency. People are rising out of into the middle class, and it poses a real challenge when people make more money. What is one of the first things that typically changes? It's their diet. It's the things they buy. It's the food they buy. And with that diet comes a higher environmental footprint, especially in the animal protein side. But it also requires more cold chain, more energy usage. And so this is I love working in this issue because I think it is the issue. It's like the nexus of all of this that's happening on the planet. Is how do we feed ourselves? How do we feed ourselves without fundamentally destroying the thing that's actually nourishing us in the planet that we have? So I think it's an amazing challenge, and I think it's really fun to be up here with my fellow panelists. With that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Abby, and she's going to talk a little more about the work that she does. So please.
Thank you.
Yep.
So good morning, everyone. I reiterate, thanks for making it through the party and out this morning. My name is Abby Pryor, and I lead the marketing and sales functions at Bright Farms. I joined Bright Farms almost 8 years ago, and that was my first entry into produce. And wow, did I fall in love with this sector and the true opportunity that we all have to feed people better and to be good stewards of this planet. So when I am at events like this, I'm just filled with gratitude, right? Not everybody gets to go to work every day and feel really committed and passionate about what they do. I feel lucky. I hope you do too. I'm going to share a little bit more about us. Nope, I'm not. It's not working, Kristen. So I'll talk a little bit about Bright Farms, which is, we are a leading indoor grower of salads. We grow in greenhouses. I am sure that everybody has heard about CEA, or Controlled Environment Agriculture, because it seems to be certainly in the trade news of late. That's what I hit. All right, I'm gonna try again next time, gang. And so let me just take a second and sort of define that, and what does controlled environment agriculture really mean? It means growing indoors largely and controlling your climate in a way that can be good for the planet and certainly can be good for people. There are two primary ways that growers are doing that today. One is called vertical farming. That tends to be indoors with fully sort of artificial light. You're growing inside sort of almost closed structure buildings. And then there are greenhouses. We fall on the greenhouse side of that category, but sometimes it can be a little bit confusing which is which. And so, why do we grow this way? Why do we grow in greenhouses using the power of the sun? We do it to give more people access to the freshest, tastiest, cleanest, and most responsibly grown produce on the planet, right? That's our goal. That's what we're working on every day. And it's in a constantly moving line that we're always, you're never over, right? There's always an opportunity to get better and better and better. But we really believe that bringing the produce as close to the consumer and as close to the point of consumption for the consumer, the better. So we're taking what is a very complex and long-distance supply chain and trying to make it shorter. And why do we do it? It's for the health of people and for the health of our planet. And in the last 8 years or so, since I've been working in this category, things have really changed. I would say 8 years ago, this was an idea. We were begging retailers just for hey, let us at least tell you what this is. Let us talk to you about why this could work. And to 8 years later, now it really being a proven model that can be good for consumers, for retailers, for growing businesses, and for the planet. And so, I think we're still at an early stage in the maturity of these businesses in the salad business. But when you look at some other commodities like tomatoes, right, this shift has largely already happened. And so I think it's an evolving maturation of indoor grown products that will shift across the grocery category. That's it. I was pointing in the wrong direction. I got it. So just a little bit more about us. We are 6 commercial scale farms today up and down the East Coast and into the central part of the country. And when I talk about the maturation of these types of businesses, our farms today are anywhere from an acre to up to 4 acres, but we actually just announced this week 4 large-scale greenhouse hubs, we're calling it, that are scalable to 40 acres each. So today, we are, all total indoor grown salads is still less than about $250 million a year. We're only growing in less than 20 acres today. These next 4 farms will get us about 200 more acres. So it's really an inflection point in the industry in a time where things are starting to really take off on the indoor front. These greenhouses are large, right? They are extremely productive. And we talk about biodiversity and we talk about land, right? We can grow, and it varies by crop, about 13 times more produce in the space indoors than you can outdoors. The growth cycle is really pretty short. We can turn around a whole new crop in about 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks. So as we talk about food waste and how do we really manage the product that we grow and what makes it to consumers, the ability to do it in this way really manages our food waste and our ability to get what we grow direct to a consumer. Gets consumer fresher product. You know, it's oftentimes we're growing it and it's showing up in a DC within 24 hours. Oftentimes I will see our product on shelf and know by looking at the codes that it is less than 48 hours old sitting at the front of, or 48 hours from harvest, I should say, at the front of the shelf. And that's pretty exciting, you know, given what that can mean for food waste in a consumer's home. They now have so much more time to use it at home, and we know if you look at so the numbers I have, if for every 19 fruits and vegetables, and I'm going to give a shout out to the Appeal team, who are my buddies and who gave me some good food waste information, if we grow 19 pieces of a fruit or a vegetable, 3 of those often lost in the field, 1 of those lost in long-term shipping, 1 of those lost at the shelf, and then another 3 by the time you get to the home. So if we can reduce what's lost in the field and reduce what's lost at home, you've already covered almost half the problem. And that's what we think a model like ours can do. So I hope you see us in a store someday soon. I pass it to Justin.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Appreciate the time and opportunity to be able to get in front of the group and talk a little bit about what we're doing at Ahold Delhaize USA in the space of sustainability. And just quickly about myself. So as mentioned in my rather long title of Director of Sustainable Operations and Brand Lead Health and Sustainability, I help support sustainable operations at Ahold Delhaize USA. And, for those that may not be as familiar with you might be more familiar with its great local brands along the East Coast, such as Food Lion, Hannaford, Stop & Shop, the Giant Company, Giant Food, and Fresh Direct. We represent those brands centrally from a health and sustainability function and support their work, but I also help support what we're doing in the space of food waste for all of the banners, as well as climate action and zero waste. Losing the mic, I think. There we go. And we've really structured our work around kind of 4 key pillars. And the sustainability space can be very complex. There's a lot of interchanging of topics and things that kind of impact one thing from the next. But our 4 key pillars kind of help guide and provide a framework for our work in sustainability, which includes healthier choices and personalized guidance, really making sure customers can get nutritious products and that there's a navigation system in place to kind of help with that journey. Transparency and sustainable products. So when we think about biodiversity and we think about the usage of land and we think about critical commodities like tea, coffee, cocoa, palm oil, what we're doing to protect and make sure we're sourcing sustainable products. Eliminating hunger and waste. So this is one of the particular pillars my team focuses a lot on, and what we do in the space of reducing food waste and also reducing plastic waste, and how we can deliver our goals of zero waste as well. And then taking bold climate action. So within this space, there's a lot to this as well between our emissions with scopes 1, 2, and 3. But really, this is the work around our climate impact, how we can reduce our emissions and work with suppliers as well to kind of balance out upstream and downstream emissions as well. So within that space, we have a number of different goals and KPIs and ways to kind of measure performance. I won't go into all of these here, but essentially, within the healthier choices space, we have a own brand healthy sales ambition, which is basically our Guiding Stars nutrition program in our stores, and how much of that product we're able to promote and encourage and make available for customers. Within transparency and sustainable products, as I mentioned, we have a lot of our critical commodity goals in this space, as well as animal welfare and cage-free and gestation crate-free commitments. For hunger and waste, this is where our work for meal donations fits in, reducing food waste 50% by 2030, making sure we achieve zero waste to landfill by 2025. Our work around packaging, which is complex and a challenging topic in its own right, but how we can kind of make packaging more circular. And then again, just the bold climate action space. So we have a net zero commitment for scopes 1 and 2 by 2040, and then for scopes 3 by 2050 as well. Although those dates are still fairly far out, it does require a lot of work today to make sure we're kind of setting up the frameworks to be in position to deliver on these goals. But this work in the frameworks for our pillars really help kind of drive engagement and partnership with our brands and with our suppliers and really across our entire value chain to make sure we continue to monitor and manage our impact that we have as a grocery retailer. As I sit on this panel and kind of just look around and in our role throughout the chain of the food process, basically, and how critical food is to life and to kind of our impact on the planet. We do feel like we have a strong responsibility to make sure, we care about where the products are coming from and kind of how they arrive on shelf, but also we manage our impact as well too and kind of look at our own operations. So these goals help guide us, and we feel we have a number of different ambition levels in here too, and there are challenges too when it comes to kind of getting the right information and making sure we're making progress in this space. But it's something we've committed to, and I'm very happy to be in this space. I have a lot of personal passion around health and sustainability and what we can do as a retailer to make a difference, and that helps drive me every single day. So always appreciate the opportunity to talk about it and kind of what we're doing in this space, and look forward to more on this panel.
Thanks, Justin. Can we reset my timer clock? Because if I don't have a clock, then I'm probably going to talk for 3 hours. Hey everyone, I'm Nathan Fenner. I'm the president and co-founder of Afresh Technologies. At Afresh, we build supply chain and inventory management software, specifically purpose-built for the fresh side of the business, specifically in the context of this conversation for produce. And when my co-founders and I started the company, it's about 6.5 years ago, we really had two foundational insights that formed the basis of our company. The first is that, and I think I love talking to a group like this because I don't think either of these foundational observations, you all will be like, wow, you consider those observations or insights. But the first was that we really believe that the future of retail is fresh. When we looked at the data, kind of, again, 6 years ago, fresh departments were growing double digits year over year, and the sales of the cereal aisle was relatively flat. Health and consumer trends were driving more and more people to fresh food. And I think most importantly, fresh has really become the critical strategic differentiator for retailers as they compete, not only with each other, but also with the advent of pure play online retailers. Fresh is the critical thing that keeps people coming back into the stores. And so we really came to believe that in order to win in the retail space, in order to win in grocery, retailers needed to be world-class in how they manage fresh. They needed to be best in fresh. Again, I don't think this will be, hopefully everyone will be nodding their head like, yeah, we totally agree with that. So that was our first insight. Our second insight was kind of completely contrary to that first insight. So when we looked at the technology landscape, and specifically when we looked at inventory management and supply chain software in grocery, we noticed that, frankly, in addition to that technology being incredibly legacy, it had all been built for the non-fresh side of the business. All the technology retailers were using to manage their supply chain was built for the cereal aisle. It was built to manage a can of baked beans. And in fact, if you look at most of those technologies, they were actually built as horizontal solutions that were meant to serve a bunch of other retail verticals other than grocery. Those same technologies were being used in apparel. They were being used for auto parts. And not surprisingly, when you brought that technology over into the hyper-perishable side of the grocery supply chain, it didn't work that well. Due to the kind of nuances and challenges of fresh food. Fresh is hyper-perishable, fresh is produced in store, it comes in a random weight, it can be mis-scanned at the register. All those things kind of render these supply chain software solutions that were designed for things that come in boxes and have barcodes, it renders them really, really ineffective. So unsurprisingly, what we saw on the fresh side of the business and grocery was businesses running their kind of departments using manual processes, literal pencil and paper, and if they had digital tools, they were often working around them. And when you use manual processes, when you use human intuition, particularly in a high turnover labor environment, unsurprisingly, you make way worse decisions, and that leads to a more inefficient supply chain. And more inefficient supply chain leads to the topic of the conversation today, which is food waste. And so we had, I think, a really, really simple idea. If we build supply chain software that is built from the ground up, focused on fresh, focused on produce, and we do so leveraging really, really frontier technology as opposed to kind of technology that's been around in the 80s, we could do a dramatically better job. So that's what we've set out to do. So our the initial kind of flagship product we built was a store-level replenishment solution for the produce department. The tool used by produce managers to do their daily inventorying and ordering workflow, and it helps them, kind of guided by AI, to create optimized recommendations to minimize food waste and maximize their in-stock position. And since then, we've started to expand our offering into this broader integrated supply chain solution. And so I think it should come probably very intuitively that a purpose-built solution, a modern solution, will do better than a kind of all-in-one, one-size-fits-all solution. I don't think anyone would find that to be particularly controversial. I think my provocative or more provocative statement is that a purpose-built solution in this industry can make a transformational difference, and that's what we've seen. So this is the impact of a particular store at a national retailer using our system for 1 week. Now, I hope skeptical people are like, well, you can have a beautiful back room if you just run your grocer completely out of stock. However, I guess you could take my word for it, or we could actually look at the broader results. If we look at what a purpose-built solution for fresh does, it actually can dramatically reduce food waste, so 25% reduction in food waste, while actually growing sales by increasing in-stock rate. And again, these aren't cherry-picked numbers. These aren't, if you notice, a lot of food waste reduction numbers that say up to 40%. These are our results across, we're now live in over 3,000 stores in the US, so greater than 8% of all produce that's ordered into grocery stores in the US each day is ordered through our solution. And on average, across those 3,000 plus stores, we're reducing food waste by 25% while increasing sales by over 3%. And so we think that there's an opportunity for transformational change from purpose-built technology.
Can I ask a quick question? That
Yeah.
25%, is that like what the store is producing out the door in terms of waste?
Well, it's actually measured as the familiar financial shrink metric that grocers are measuring against their bottom line, but it is a very good proxy for basically the number of items that are being thrown out. So you could think of it as if before every 100 items that they were bringing into the store, they were throwing out 10, now they're throwing out 7. Thanks.
Hello, can you hear me? Phone. So my name is Luis Yepes, and I am the Chief Procurement Officer for the Farmlink Project. I myself have been working in logistics and transportation here. I've been a volunteer in the food recovery space since I was in high school. And I've seen, a lot of issues when it comes to food access in communities around the U.S. So I made it my life's work to make sure that we provide food access to the communities that.
Hold up 1 second, please.
Hello.
He's a singer, so like the microphone is perfect, right? Forget the lapel mic.
I mean, I'm the grandson of two farmers. But I decided to run away from agriculture agriculture at a young age, so I studied music. I actually sang opera professionally for about 7 years. But then agriculture pulled me back in. You can't run away from it at all. So I decided to do something I was passionate about, which is providing food access to the people that need it the most. And I'm part of the farming project. The farming project is, there was a lot of disruptions to the supply chain, so a group of students created a grassroots effort to try to connect food that was sitting in farms due to the broken supply chain to the communities that need it the most. Not only food banks, but community-based organizations all over the country. Over the last 2 years, our organization has operated remotely. We're 100% remotely. And we're very fortunate to have had over 600 students, university students, work with us as volunteers. And we've been around for over 2 years. Now we have a staff of 20 industry professionals in their given subjects that is basically who lead, who work alongside the volunteers food to those people. The purpose is to make abundance of nutritious food accessible to everyone. And our solution is to connect farms to communities around the country. Okay. In the over 2 years that we've been around, we have recovered about 100 million pounds of food. We have prevented about 34 million pounds of greenhouse gases from getting into the atmosphere, and we have distributed food in over 300 communities all around the country. We believe that we can use donated produce accessible to all today. Basically, we want to prevent surplus from getting to people in need instead of getting to landfills. We want to prevent greenhouse gases from hitting the atmosphere. And we want to prioritize communities that have been traditionally neglected or are outside of the distribution systems within the United States. We want to help farm working communities that are basically do not have access to the produce to the products that they grow. We want to be able to help isolated communities all around the country that are 100 miles away from the nearest grocery store, and that don't have that don't have food banks dedicated food banks in the area, or that have distribution outlets that do not conform to their schedule. For example, in a community, in a farm working community where farm workers are working 7 to 7 or 5 to 7, and their wives are working at the packing house, if we do a food distribution any day during the week, even Saturday, they are unable to go get food. So we started by innovating and creating distribution outlets during the weekends, during Sunday, when they take the day off to go to church. In Native American communities, just as the Navajo Nation, the Cherokee Nation, or the many communities around the country where there are parts of the community that are very isolated, we created satellite distribution systems in which we have a big distribution and a few smaller distributions, so we could provide food access to people with disabilities, to seniors in those communities that don't have the capability of coming to distributions. And there you could see the Map the Meal Gap study from Feeding America that shows you all the counties that are actually above 10% in food insecurity. The dark green will show you all the counties that have about 10% or more for food insecurity. As you see, hunger is not something that It's not around us, it's all around us. It's intertwined with our supply chain and with the work that we do. And first of all, I want to thank all of you, because if this group is definitely committed to fighting hunger. By growing food, you are taking the first step and a great step to be able to provide food access to all. So thank you very much. We recover at the Farming Project. We have distribution systems that allow us to actually make sure that we collect produce all over the supply chain, directly from farms, processing centers, storage sheds, cold storage, and distribution centers. And the Farming Project is a national organization. We are equipped to collect any amount of food anywhere in the country. We basically understand how farmers work. So if you give us a call anytime telling us that you have a certain amount of food that you need to get out of your system, that you need to get out of your storage or your cold storage facility because there's more coming, we'll make sure that that gets out of your workflow, out of your pipeline within 24 hours. And what we also commit to is solving the puzzle of quality issues, so that the food gets distributed 20 to 48 hours after it gets picked up from your facilities. We also work in collecting all the information from donated product, so we could make it available to you at the end of the year, so you could take advantage of the tax benefits associated with your donations. Here's a secret. We know how much food it will take to reduce food insecurity in this country. We need 7.4 billion pounds of food to feed the 34 million food insecure people in the United States. We know what the number is. We understand that it's not all going to be solved with donated produce, but it's going to take all of us to work together to be able to solve this issue. And once again, we appreciate your support and we appreciate the work that you're already doing. And thank you very much. This is a solvable problem, and we should all unite and get together to be able to make sure that no one goes hungry, because hunger doesn't take a break, doesn't take any weekends. Thank you.
Thanks, Luis. Okay, so now we're going to open it up. The mics are open. I think they want everybody that has questions. There's microphones in these two aisles, and I'm sure if you're hiding somewhere in the crowd, we'll get you a mic. If there's a burning question right now or a conversation piece, let's not wait. Let's start now. I have a couple questions that I'm going to kick off with, but please make this interactive. One of the things I would like to start with, instead of a group question, I want to go to Justin, actually. Retailers tend to get every problem in the world piled on top of you, right? It's like you have to deal with all of the above issues, food waste being one. But you mentioned 50% reduction by 2030 is your goal. Knowing your group here in this audience, how do we get more people involved in helping you reach your goal? But how does this become an entire supply chain, an entire ecosystem of actors that are helping to do this work?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and you're not wrong. Also, in terms of, I feel like the retailers are kind of central to a lot of what's going on, being the direct point of contact with suppliers, with farmers, with CPGs, but also where we interact directly with the customers as well, too. So kind of in the middle of this food supply chain, and, although there's a lot that we can do within our own operations, and everything from working on forecasting and replenishment, things similar to what Afresh does, and making sure we have the right amount of product and kind of our have what's there and what needs to be available to the consumers, but also having a strong donation network and making sure that we have those relationships with local partners and groups like Feeding America to make sure that we can kind of capture whatever we don't sell and make sure that it's donated and help get to some of the issues that Luis was talking about around food insecurity in the country. But also too, there's educational components as well too for the consumers, and there's a lot that can be done in terms of making sure the right amount of food is getting to places, but there's things that you can do with it too. There's storage techniques that can be, you can get creative and you can do different things with recipes, and we can be part of kind of that journey and that storytelling process. But as part of Ajo Delays, we've signed up for something called 10-20-30, which is basically 10 large retailers collaborate with at least 20 suppliers to cut food waste in half by 2030. And so that kind of really broadens the work beyond our own operations and what we're doing in looking at food waste holistically and recognizing that, kind of once it is at the farm and starts going through the supply chain, that there's opportunities kind of throughout that process, whether it's making sure we capture as much from the farm, but also the cold chain management and how it gets from one place to another, or working with kind of more localized operations and things like what Bright Farms is doing. There's components to that I think having visibility to the total supply chain and kind of really how it goes from farm to customer through the retailer is an opportunity, and kind of helping shed light on what these different opportunities are depending on what stage you're in. And so I think if there's work going on, either at the farm, we're doing some work this year as well too, with CGF and WWF actually, to kind of look at some upstream projects and how we can start to measure that. And I would say historically for the last few years and stuff, a lot of our food waste reduction tactics have been within our own operations and within our stores, and there's certainly opportunities there to continue to get better. But if we think about the supply chain being connected and how our relationships with our farmers may not know resources like FarmLink, or may not be connected with Feeding America like we are as a retailer, and there's different ways we can kind of help bridge those gaps, because it really does take all parts of the chain to kind of make a difference and to make sure that we're looking at anything that's an opportunity here. But certainly being at the retailer puts us at the heart of that.
Yeah, I want to read the 10 by 20 by 30 that Justin mentions. I think is important, because what this is, in my view, it's a transparency. It's getting the entire supply chain to recognize that we need to have better information on the types of losses and inventory surplus that we have, because once we start to identify that surplus and recognize it, then we can do something with it. And that's really at the heart of 10 by 20 by 30, is getting more of the supply chain to be actively measuring and understanding the inventory and surplus that we have. And I want to challenge us to do something in this conversation too. Let's stop talking about waste, and let's talk about surplus. Let's talk about trying to actively not have waste, because food is always food. It can always be put to use, to some better use. I want to go to this mic right here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I guess to emphasize what you're already talking about with what the retailer can do with the food waste, for the FarmLink especially, what ways can a retailer help programs like FarmLink? I mean, because I know there's probably a lot of supply chains that can do that, but for the retailer level, what are things that we can do to help?
For retailers, we are trying to be as efficient as possible by going to the pre-consumer supply chain, but there are groups that are dedicated to actually doing food recovery at the retail level. And depending on where your retail outlets are, I could put you in contact with some of those groups. So it shouldn't be a problem. But what I would say to like organizations like ours, if you're ever in a situation in which when you receive any type of produce from your grocery shippers, there's inequality issues, and you know that it's not going to make it to retail, you could always give us a call, and we'll be more than happy to, get that produce and provide it to people in need. Also, you could work with your local nonprofits that are focusing on actually feeding people directly. There's a lot of soup kitchens or the direct community distribution nonprofits that actually work with retail recovery. And we could talk later, and I could get you in touch with some of those in your area.
Thank you.
Perfect. Do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Lynette Johnson with Society of St. Andrew, and I want to thank you for doing this session today and for all the points that you're raising. But I also want to add one piece to it, and that is that today's March 3rd. On March 1st, food stamp benefits declined. They went back to pre-pandemic levels. Well, since the pandemic, the supplements that were made during the pandemic kept hunger from rising really exponentially. But since the pandemic, we've had 10% inflation. But the average SNAP benefit recipient lost $90 in food purchasing power 2 days ago. And that's not coming back. So hunger will be rising again, and the need for fresh produce to be able to give to people who are hungry is going to be rising. So it won't be just 7.4 billion pounds of food that's needed. You know, we expect to see at least another 8, probably million people in this country being hungry because of the decrease in food stamps.
Can you add just one more, maybe a comment? So there's this idea that we can donate to people, but then what SNAP does is it gives people buying power and it lets people use commercial markets in order to do that. Why do you think that's important?
Why do I think SNAP benefits are important?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, we think we're doing a great job with all of the food that we're rescuing and all the extra food that you all are finding to donate. But federal programs are providing 85 to 90% of the food relief that's happening in this country. So all of the charitable food system combined is about 10% of the food aid. So if every church in this country, every synagogue, every religious group, every altruistic person in this country gave more money to help feed hungry people, we wouldn't be able to come close to matching what the federal government is already doing. And I guess I'd also add that the SNAP benefit allows people to purchase food with dignity. People don't necessarily, the EBT card now can fit into the card reader, and people don't know who's using that card or who's not. It allows people to make choices about the food they get instead of just getting a bag of stuff that they might not know how to use. So SNAP benefits provide great resources for people who are hungry, and that said as someone who works every day with the charitable food system. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. You're 100% right.
I actually want to go to Abby next. So talk about growth in your industry. Like what, if you had to lay out a perfect trajectory for what it looks like how do you see growth in your industry? But then how do you see your industry expanding into other products and other things you're selling?
Yeah, so I can speak with expertise in salads. I can speak with my best guesses on everything else. But I think where we are headed in the category in which we compete, we see the amount of food waste being driven right now by the climate on the West Coast, right? By drought, by fire, by then heavy rain, right? And the amount of crops that we're losing in the ground because of the volatility of where we are growing most of the product is leading to a new way of thinking for how we grow things. And so I think the speed at which the indoor industry here in the U.S., there's always been a lot of indoor grown product coming into the U.S., largely from Canada and Mexico. But I think the speed with we will now see those farms grow and develop and start to supply our own country here in the U.S. will be dramatic over the next 10 years. We're going to be a leader in the space, but we're not certainly alone, right? There are other great companies here at SEPC that are doing that as well and bringing really great agriculture companies and jobs to local communities that, for the last 50 to 70 years really haven't had them as we've focused all of our effort in many categories on the West Coast. We're going to focus on salads. That's what we're good at. But there's companies doing amazing things in berries and in vine crops and and all sorts of other categories where right now the technology exists to do this well. I mean, there's people growing hops and wheat and corn and all sorts of stuff, and those are really now more in the R&D phase. But the big important categories in the store, it's proven that they can be really grown with high quality and market efficiency indoors. And so I think we're going to only see that grow over the next 10 years. And I think, we believe that on the salad side, 50% of your salad is going to be grown indoor in 10 years from now.
50% in 10 years?
Yeah.
That's the prediction. Okay, and then you had mentioned a stat too, 13x efficiency. Were you just talking land efficiency?
Yeah, that's mostly land, and it really depends on kind of what you're growing, and so it's a broad number that's sort of industry data.
I'm sure there's efficiencies not just in land, but in water usage.
Absolutely. Yeah, we are able to grow completely without pesticides. So not only is that cleaner for the way you eat the food, but then think of all the pesticides that you've then removed from the soil if it had been grown in a different way. And so that's really, and when we talked about biodiversity early on, right, if we start to be able to use less land to grow more product, removing some of that we would have had to add to the soil, what else can you do with that land? And how can you return that land to a more biodiverse environment?
Yeah. Let me go to this mic here.
First off, thank you so much for your time and your commitment to the issue. So just in this brief amount of time we've already alluded a little bit to the idea of consistent supply of product, efficiency within the supply chain, and then also increasing the access for consumers. But my question stems from something you mentioned, Pete. You said we need an increased level of information within and coming from our food industry. So my overarching question is, in a way, are we inadvertently creating a barrier to access to some of our products sometimes? Because in a society that is driven by marketing and media influence, we oftentimes have a lot of fear and phobias around food. And so when it's time for those consumers to actually make the purchase or consume that product, there's so much sentiment around GMOs, gene editing, organic versus conventional, all of these things. We actually create so many different decisions that sometimes consumers don't even know what to buy. So would any of you like to speak a little bit to that concept?
Well, what I would say is that definitely the different price points do create some barriers to access. And also, but actually, that is within the section of the population that is able to buy the products. The percentage of the population that is not able to get the products is actually a dormant market sector that could be that will actually buy products if they get to know the products and the differentiators in quality and taste. So, most of the nonprofit organizations that are doing food distributions are not only taking care of donating product, but also teaching people how to eat new varieties of food that they weren't really exposed to before. We're actually promoting consumption. And it's not going to happen right away. But if somebody was hungry and they actually use your product, they're going to be thankful. And when they're in a position to actually buy your product, they will. It's like investing in the future of the consumption of your product.
And when I was mentioning information, I was like, in my brain, I'm thinking, how do we get to a point where we have really amazing inventory information, basically, of all the things we're growing across the country? Now, I know this gets very tricky because with inventory comes the issue of like pricing and how this market functions, right? And I know that there is a skepticism, there's a reluctance to share information, especially at farm level, because you're always getting pressed on having to provide things cheaper and at less margin. But I think what might happen with more information and more transparency on what inventories we have is that you could find alternative market channels. You could find more money in the donation channel side. And it could actually lead to higher levels of profitability if we just expose fundamental pricing of the system in terms of like what it costs to get food out of field, right? That is pretty much a fixed cost. Like you have to have people and technology and labor that helps that. That you don't just get to not do that. That's a cost you have on a farm. And when we kind of expose those costs and we expose that inventory, I think we create alternative market channels. So that's what I was meaning by transparency. I do know that you guys are working with How Good. And maybe you could talk a little bit about that in terms of.
Yes. So we have two different types of product rating systems basically today in our store. One is guiding stars. So that is about this word behind me, nutrition. So if we think about the food, it kind of cuts through some of the labels like organic, which there might be a common perception like that's healthier for me, but this is strictly getting to the nutritional density of food products and making sure that the vitamins and fats and sugars are all kind of being accounted for and whatever is actually going to the product. So we have that, which rates basically all of our products today, all food products. And if it is nutritionally dense enough, it will receive 1, 2, or 3 stars. There is another program that we have that he just mentioned called How Good. And so outside of nutritional density, this is sort of the sustainability impact of these products. So they look at ingredients and they look at the products themselves and what are the farming practices and what is the water usage, what's the climate impact, where are they sourced, and what is the total kind of environmental impact of that product, where in a similar fashion it can rate products kind of 1, 2, or 3 and help with the consumer kind of make some of those decisions when they're in the store or shopping online. We have How Good online on our kind of shopping platform for several of the brands today. We're guiding stars. You have it kind of on the tag in store today right now as well too. But they are two different programs, but we're using both of them because to your point, that's something we hear from the consumers as well too, that it can be challenging to make these decisions when you're in a store and you're trying to either buy healthy or you're trying to buy sustainably, because there are a lot of complicated claims and marketing things that can be within that. I know FTC is updating their green guides right now as well too. It's kind of still open for a commentary period, but that kind of helps also and kind of helps create some standards around what can be said and what are actually some of these claims. So it's a little bit less confusing for the consumer.
Yeah, and we'll try to get to everybody's questions. Let's go here next.
Hey, my question's kind of for Justin. You had mentioned you're taking bold climate action and you look to reduce emissions 50% by 2030 and net zero by 2040. It's kind of an energy usage question. Over time, cultures have been proven like when they thrive, there's obviously more energy usage. As technology advances, there's more energy usage. I'm just kind of curious what steps you guys are taking. I know there's kind of a strong small sector that's doing things like like stranded natural gas. They're trying to use that companies can't get to. Flared gas, is there any possible way of like capturing that in order to create energy that would also reduce emissions at the same time? And basically, how would that integrate into preventing food waste?
Yeah, so great question. So we have two sort of different commitments within that one. The one you reference is around our scopes 1 and 2 emissions. So this is within our own operations. And basically, we have a handful of different emission sources. It's electricity generation, it's fuel for our tractors and fleets, it's natural gas, and it's refrigerants. That's kind of where the emissions are coming from. And in each one of those spaces, we're doing different things to either promote efficiencies, just things like switching to LED lights helps, reduce the emissions and kind of consumption, electricity consumption. But eventually, at some point, getting to zero emissions energy sources and renewable energy can kind of help make sure that the electricity we are consuming is zero emissions, essentially. So there's a lot of work behind the electricity component of it within refrigerants. That's a challenging sector in itself, but what is the maintenance? How can we have more low GWP refrigerants and kind of climate-friendly refrigerants, which requires converting them in the stores and making sure the stores are kind of being managed and monitored from a refrigeration standpoint. There are components, though, too, around fuel and natural gas, which there's a lot of emerging technologies and new things kind of in this space that we are looking at. I will say natural gas right now is something, if you have equipment that is pulling off natural gas, you can convert to electric, and then electric could then be powered with renewable, so then you could go to zero emissions that way. But I know there's different companies working as well too on capturing the emissions that actually comes from natural gas production to where that can then lower the emissions of natural gas. And it's a very emerging market as well with the fleet side of things also. We may be a few years out from, seeing a fully zero emissions fleet and kind of having the infrastructure, whether it's hydrogen or it's electric or it's some other zero emission source basically for this. But we have quite an effort and quite a team around, making sure we are, not only keeping our pulse on where some of this is going, but also investing in it and making sure that we're kind of making it a business priority to deliver on our emissions goals. But then on the other side of things, the scope 3 and kind of value chain, how it impacts food waste, that is definitely kind of a big component of it, and that is a very challenging sector as well too. Not only just from an action standpoint on how you actually drive down all of your kind of third-party emissions, if you will, but how do you even kind of measure it accurately in the first place as well too. So gathering good information on scope 3 and kind of value chain emissions is something we're in the middle of as well right now, and it's a very kind of long-term project and is very complex, but anything that can be done, even currently right now from like a pilot standpoint in either getting better data or proving out that emissions are being reduced, either at the farm or kind of through our supply chain process is something we're very curious about.
So I'm going to go here, and then I have a question, Nathan, for you after that, but go ahead.
Yes. Sorry, I'm short. So I just first of all want to thank you so much for pouring into everybody in here, especially us stars. But I come to you with the question about promoting consumption. And I was firstly going to hit on the SNAP benefits going down, but I think that she did a fantastic job on that. So I come from a very poverty-stricken community, and in a school system where food waste it's pretty bad. So we implemented a program in our entire school system called Helping Hands Ending Hunger, where you take food that is prepackaged, like little applesauces or things, or milk that's unopened, and you give it back so that we can then in turn, put it in food bags or re-put it back in the refrigerator for later consumption.
Like a share table, right?
Sir?
Share table? Like a...
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, got it.
So I really come to you with the question of, how are you implementing this promoting consumption within school systems or even, homeless shelters or community kitchens or things like that? Because I know we've talked about community things, but we haven't really hit on the school system aspect, and food waste is heavily impacted within the school systems. So,
I'll just quickly do a plug. World Wildlife Fund, we created a program about 4 years ago called Food Waste Warriors. So what it does is it introduces a curriculum that you actually put into the classroom, and you talk about the connection between the planet and the food system. And then what it does is it asks students to do food waste audits and to actually take a look at the food that you're throwing away and make it a science project. Like, what's the water footprint of that food you just threw in the trash? What's the greenhouse gas emission? And then that leads to intervention points like you're talking about, like creating a share table or not taking that unopened milk and just throwing it in the trash. So the Food Waste Warrior program is something that we've been promoting. It's very near and dear to me, and I would love to talk to you about it afterwards.
I would love to jump in on that one too. When I take off my Bright Farms hat, and one of my other jobs is a member of the board of directors for the International Fresh Produce Association. And so when I hear the comments about SNAP benefits, when I hear what you're talking about now, I think it is so important that we as a fresh produce community have a shared and united voice, and some of the discussions that we've been having around that, around how do we help bring together the entire fresh produce, community to address this, and how do we have a stronger voice as a united united industry are really important. And so I would say pay attention to what's going on in Washington around everything, including, the National Nutrition Summit that just took place for the first time in, I think, 60 years at the White House. There's a lot going on with the Farm Bill, and how do we think about the Farm Bill as a way of ensuring healthy food getting into the mouths of people. There's great work being done within the industry by so many different trade groups and by so many different parties to really address this from as high of a level as we can get to. And I'd love to talk about it more. I nerd out on that like crazy.
What I would say is that there's also organizations like Brighter Bites
Yes,
that have actually education
absolutely, doing great work.
programs doing great work. So there's definitely nonprofits that do that work, and we could definitely speak about that.
Yeah. Thank you for that, by the way. And we'll go to this next, but I want to ask Nathan a quick question. We haven't heard from you in a bit. Do computers do inventory management better?
That wasn't on the pre-assigned list. You're throwing me off here. Do computers do inventory management better?
Well, I'm thinking like what you're offering is you look at shelf life, right? You look at inventory management.
Yeah.
And I know that in the produce industry, especially in retail, like it's a lot of it's human decisions all the time. And when you start to add artificial intelligence and when you start to look at a deeper analytics in this, is there massive room for improvement?
I mean, obviously our contention would be yes. I think what we're seeing in the kind of technological environment more broadly is the leveraging of big data to make systems more efficient. This is what Amazon has leveraged to make its supply chains more and more efficient. I think the critical challenge in the produce industry is that there are kind of gaps and noise in the data that have made the leveraging of kind of new age technology far more challenging than in some of the other traditional industries. So I think the critical question is, can we leverage technology to make supply chains more efficient when the data is not very good? Because there's that old kind of adage or whatever, garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
And so I think if you take a traditional approach to the technology, an approach that comes from kind of other industries where you expect the data to be good, and you leverage that technology that expects the data to be good, then it's going to do really poorly because the data is going to be bad, so you're going to get garbage out.
Yeah.
So I think in order for us to benefit from what computers can do, we need to take a different approach that doesn't expect accuracy in the data. I think inherent to the challenge in produce specifically is that the data just won't be perfect. And there's a plethora of reasons why that's the case. Maybe this is abundantly obvious to everyone, but an apple doesn't have a barcode on it. It can be scanned out as conventional when it's organic. That throws off your understanding of what demand is. Things are produced in the store, things are random weight, shipment data disappears, there's a fragmented upstream supply chain. All those things drive gaps in the data. And so if you're using that traditional approach that expects good data, you will fail. So the question then becomes, how can we, basically, are there technologies that can really leverage imperfect data to still drive improvements in our decision making? And that's really what we're trying to do at our company, which is leverage some of these new areas of machine learning, such as the types of decision making under uncertainty that you see in, for example, autonomous cars. So autonomous cars need to make really tough decisions with imperfect information, and that's a whole new field of this world. And I'd like to selfishly, we point to our results as a real step change forward over what those traditional legacy technology companies can do.
And did you want to mention this idea, we talked about this before, this post-sale shelf life? What is that?
Yeah, so I think one of the things is that what we see with our technology is that once the consumer buys something that's been kind of gone through our supply chain governed by us, it has 2 more days of shelf life. And that's really a foundation if you go back.
In the home.
Yeah, exactly. So after if you buy an apple that's gone through a more efficient supply chain, it's going to have 2 more days of shelf life. If you look back to that picture I showed of the back rooms, basically if you have a really efficient supply chain that's not stacking safety stock at various nodes along the way, the product is moving through it more quickly. And therefore, when it gets to the home, it's less likely to have food waste. And I think what I would just maybe, because it's pretty clear no one wants to ask me any questions. What I would point out is that I think that we're talking a lot about the critical value of kind of donation and donation programs and things like that to deal with both food waste and food insecurity. But I would also really, really like to point people back to the root cause of this problem. And the root cause of this problem, to me, is an inefficient supply chain. We've accepted for too long that 30 to 40% food waste is a natural kind of outcome of this supply chain. And then if we can make it substantially more efficient, obviously that will reduce food waste, but that really actually also hits this food insecurity point. And that's because when you have a more efficient supply chain, you have less food waste, and then it becomes more profitable for the retailers to sell fresh food, to sell nutritious and healthy food. And we have this remarkable free market economics where we have dogged competition amongst retailers that if it is more profitable for them to sell fresh food, the competition in the market will drive prices down. And driving prices down of fresh food is going to be the thing that more so than any donation program will broaden access to health and nutritious food. So I think the work we're doing to kind of divert food that would otherwise go to waste is incredible, but the root cause here is an inefficient supply chain, and we can do better.
And I want to ask you all kinds of questions too.
I appreciate that, Pete.
But I agree, like the prevention side is the goal here. It's actually to reduce donations. I think that's often left out of the conversation.
I think personally, from a systemic solution perspective, let's hit the root causes.
Question there on that, Mike.
Yeah, good morning. And first off, thank you guys for taking time to cover this very important topic and everything we've discussed today. My name's Frank Richards. I'm CEO of Second Harvest of South Georgia, one of the 200 Feeding America food banks in the country. And just to address a few of the points that folks have been talking about from the food bank network side, to kind of update you on some of the things that are going on with the network. The local store pickup, someone asked a question about that at the very beginning. Most all your food banks in the country have a local retail pickup that we work with, most of the major grocery store chains and things of that nature. And they're really working toward within the network what they call agency-enabled pickup, especially more in rural communities where you have difficulty getting product, especially through your smaller chains like Dollar Generals and things like that, where you may not have a cell phone signal, or you may not have internet, or you may not even have public transportation to be able to get around to get access to products and foods like that. We can enable local groups to actually pick that up and get it out into very rural, remote communities and things like that. I also have the advantage of being a fourth-generation farmer, so I have the just culturally in my life not wanting to waste anything. Everything we grow, we want to use, and that's just part of what's ingrained in our families and the things of what we do every day. So the big piece of what we do as an organization is we work a lot on sourcing to excess. We have over 90 growers in South Georgia that donate through the food bank network with us. We pick up anywhere between 6 and 10 million pounds of fresh a year. There's no way we could use that in rural Georgia, so we excess it out to our other 200 food banks in the country to make sure things don't go to waste. And that is a huge, very fast-moving supply chain that has to happen quickly, especially when you're picking up products that usually our refrigerator trailers are sitting on the dock at a packing shed on Friday. So it's got a very short shelf life anyway, so we've got to move it really, really quickly from that standpoint. Another great thing with the food banks of those that work with them is the meal production. Part of what folks have talked about with SNAP benefits running out, as well as the nutrition programs within schools. Our organization, especially in rural Georgia, we do a program called Kids Cafe where we feed over 5,000 children a day, and they get a hot meal after school. That's only because of our local growers and our local retailers and our local communities that are able to make those programs happen. And it's been a lot of change that's going on within those markets to make sure that we can get those products and food out to it. A couple of last points I just wanted to hit real quick. Within the food banking network, and I'm sure those that work with social service organizations in different communities, after COVID, what you saw is only 1 out of every 3 people that used to volunteer pre-COVID are actually returning to volunteerism. So the model of how food is getting out once it gets into the system is changing dramatically. So there's much more with mobile pantry drops in communities. There's much more with getting these products out into rural areas, which takes a lot of money to do that kind of products and services and things like that. So we're very grateful for the folks that support us and give those kinds of dollars to make sure that we can work on those things. And the last point I wanted to make really quick is that if we have farmers in here today that maybe you're a subchapter S or a LLC or a cash-based accounting and all that stuff. Also know you can still donate as well. And now, about 5 years ago, our legislative team worked on some stuff and got some new laws passed to where now you can get the same tax credits as C Corps. And if you want more information about that, I'll be around and can help you with that as well from that standpoint. But thank you all very much for what you do and everything that you're working with.
Pete, may I clarify something that Justin said?
Sure, and then I want to get to these two questions right here, because you've been standing there a long time.
I want to say, Justin mentioned about us, by the way, I want to clarify, we work with every single food recovery organization in the country, including Feed in America, the recipients of a lot of the produce that we recover. We just saw the need for more nimble distribution systems in some areas. So I wanted to clarify that. Thank you for all your work, brother.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
And thanks for your patience. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Emily Colbreth. As a current student of agribusiness at Clemson, I wanted to know how y'all believed us as the next generation in ag and in other industries can really correct and innovate effectively with these issues of insecurity and sustainability in mind moving forward.
If I could just say one thing, I think FarmLink is a perfect example of don't underestimate the value you can bring by just getting after it and getting out there and doing something. Like this team at FarmLink and Ben's out there, like within a couple months, literally, of COVID, they had a team out there doing work and rescuing food immediately. And it didn't take apps, it didn't take technology, it just took like human spirit to do it. And so don't underestimate the power that you have just to get after it and go, you know? Don't wait on anybody. Don't ask permission, just do it.
Yeah, volunteering is very important. I've been a volunteer since I was in high school, and I remember when I decided to volunteer, I needed to do something. I knew I didn't have money to donate, but I knew that I could work, and just being part of the movement and making a difference by volunteering is very important. Thank you.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you.
One more question, and then you get to the last one. Go ahead.
Good morning, panel. Thank you for answering our questions today. It's been so helpful and insightful. My name is Lucinda McKeechin. I'm a student at Auburn University, and I come from Tifton, Georgia. So where I'm from, this is a question specifically for Lewis. Where I'm from, there's a lot of pecan production. In fact, my family owns and operates its own 40-acre pecan orchard, and it's continuing to grow. So my question to you and for the FarmLink project is, do you guys accept donations from tree nuts and peanuts? Because they are very nutritionally dense, and they have a longer shelf life as opposed to something that's hyper-perishable.
We definitely do. We accept all agricultural commodities because we understand that it takes variety to be able to provide nutrition for people. So we're more than happy to take tree nuts and any type of food that you have available. We could speak after.
Do you guys have locations in South Georgia?
Well, what you could say about us is we work with several organizations throughout the country. So we work with several organizations in your area, 100%. What we are is we are logistics and transportation service, so that we provide produce to community organizations that don't have the budget to get the food in their door, to get the food into their doors. So you could say that we don't have a facility. You could say we have the combined space of every single food recovery organization in the country.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think one more question, and we got to cut it because it's the end, and you've been waiting patiently, so go for it. And then you're the last one.
Perfect timing. I don't have a question. Just giving thanks. This is my first time here. I'm Aaron Warner, Aiden Logistics, small broker out of Tampa. I shipped like 200 loads of produce in the past year out of my house, and I had no clue. It's like 10,000 loads in 374 days, really. So I had 48 hours ago, I bought my ticket to come up here with a team of mine, and just listening here in an hour and 15 minutes. No clue what my purpose was. I had my purpose. I threw away so much produce last year, not happy about it, and I've broken supply chain. I mean, it's all the questions are here, the hunger, the purpose is here. I really appreciate all of you guys and the energy, every bit of it. So grateful we're in Disney and here and all of it. So really, really awesome.
Yeah,
thank you guys for being here for the big picture.
We'll reach out to you, brother.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this morning. Let's give our panelists and moderator a round of applause. So we have our next session coming up at 10:15. We have a half-hour break, so grab yourself some refreshments. We are going to ask that you guys do clear the room so we can get reset. Thank you so much.